The winter air was crisp, and the quiet hum of early morning life seeped through the small town. At first glance, it was an ordinary day. Birds chirped lazily, the sun's rays stretched over frost-coated rooftops, and neighbors exchanged courteous nods as they passed by. Among them was Martha, an elderly black woman with a worn cane and a kind smile that seemed to hide 1,000 untold stories. She shuffled slowly down the uneven pavement, her breath visible in the cold as she hummed an old gospel tune. To the casual observer, she was just another senior citizen lost in her thoughts. But the truth, as it always is, was far more complicated. Officer Mitchell, a young cop with a sharp uniform and a sharper demeanor, leaned against his patrol car, sipping from a thermos that promised coffee but tasted more like regret. He was new to this town, new to its faces, its secrets. He didn't see Martha approach at first. He was too busy staring into his reflection in the patrol car window, rehearsing a half-hearted apology for the captain after another botched report. But when he did notice her, something in her demeanor made him pause. She wasn't just walking toward him. She was stumbling, as if gravity had shifted its rules just for her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Mitchell straightened, instinctively reaching for his radio, though he wasn't sure why. Something about her unsteady gait tugged at a primal chord in him. Martha didn't respond right away. Her eyes locked on his, and for a moment Mitchell felt as if she could see through him, peeling back the layers of pretense and duty to the raw truth underneath. She stopped a few feet away, clutching her side as if trying to catch her breath. "Officer," she said finally, her voice raspy but steady. Then came the 3 words that turned his blood to ice. "It's all connected." "What's connected?" Mitchell asked, his voice faltering. Martha's gaze was distant now, her lips curling into a faint smile that was neither warm nor reassuring. The kind of smile you see in a dream you were sure was a nightmare. "It's already begun," she whispered, and then she collapsed. Mitchell didn't remember running to her or calling for backup. But the next thing he knew, paramedics were lifting her onto a stretcher, and his hands were shaking. The words replayed in his mind like a broken record. Asterisk, it's all connected, asterisk. Back at the station, Mitchell couldn't shake the encounter. His partner, Daniels, dismissed it as the ramblings of an old woman, probably dementia, he'd said with a shrug. But Mitchell wasn't so sure. Something about her voice, her eyes, those cryptic words, nodded him. He dug through records, finding little about Martha except for a few notes. Widowed, no immediate family, churchgoer. A life that seemed simple on paper, but somehow felt like a meticulously crafted facade. The inciting incident had planted its seed, and Mitchell, unknowingly, was about to water it with his curiosity. The small anomalies began to mount. A note left on his windshield in handwriting that matched Martha's. Strange, flickering lights in the police station's basement where old case files were kept. And most disturbingly, the discovery of a photo buried in the archives. A younger Martha standing next to a man who looked eerily like Mitchell himself. It didn't make sense. None of it did, but one thing was certain. The illusion of stability in this town was just that. An illusion. And as Mitchell's grip on reality began to falter, he couldn't help but feel that whatever Martha had tried to warn him about, it was already too late to stop. The town seemed smaller somehow, as if the streets themselves were closing in on Officer Mitchell. He spent the next week piecing together scraps of information about Martha, chasing answers that slipped through his fingers like smoke. The note she had left on his windshield haunted him. Just 3 words, hastily scrawled in shaky handwriting. Asterisk trust no one asterisk. The first person Mitchell turned to was Pastor Graham, a respected figure in the community, and someone Martha had been known to confide in. The pastor was worn and calm, his presence a balm against the storm of confusion swirling in Mitchell's mind. But when pressed about Martha, his demeanor shifted ever so slightly, just enough to raise suspicion. "Martha has always been eccentric," Graham said carefully, his eyes darting to the stained glass window, as if seeking divine guidance. "She's been troubled since her husband passed. Sometimes she sees things that aren't there." Mitchell wanted to believe him, but there was something rehearsed about the pastor's tone. as if he were reading lines from a script. Later that evening, Mitchell found a surveillance tape from the night of Martha's collapse. To his shock, it showed Graham standing across the street watching. He hadn't mentioned being there. Why? As Mitchell dug deeper, the web of lies began to reveal itself. He interviewed several of Martha's neighbors, each more unhelpful than the last. One woman claimed Martha had been acting paranoid for weeks, while another swore she'd seen strange men in suits entering her house late at night. But when Mitchell checked the house, it was spotless, too spotless, as if someone had erased all traces of her life. Then there was Daniels, Mitchell's partner, whose loyalty had always been a steady anchor in the turbulent seas of police work. But lately, Daniels had grown distant, brushing off Mitchell's theories with uncharacteristic sharpness. "You're chasing ghosts," he snapped one afternoon, slamming his coffee cup on the desk. Mitchell couldn't shake the feeling that Daniels was hiding something. The suspicion solidified when he overheard a hushed phone conversation. "He's getting too close. We might need to intervene." Mitchell's stomach churned as he realized the voice on the other end belonged to Pastor Graham. The turning point came when Mitchell received an anonymous package. A set of old photos, each more unsettling than the last. They showed a younger Martha standing beside prominent figures in the town, including Graham and the previous police chief. The final photo made his blood run cold. It was a group shot of Martha, Graham, and Daniels, all smiling at a gathering marked with the same symbol he'd found etched into the floor of Martha's basement. Driven by rage and betrayal, Mitchell confronted Daniels in the dimly lit break room. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, throwing the photo onto the table. Daniels froze, his face pale. "You don't understand," he whispered. "It's bigger than you think." "Then make me understand," Mitchell growled, but Daniels only shook his head. "It's too late," he said quietly, slipping a folded piece of paper into Mitchell's hand before walking away. The note was simple but devastating. Asterisk, your next asterisk. Desperation clawed at Mitchell as he tried to piece together the puzzle. The contradictions and lies began to weigh on him, eroding his confidence and sense of reality. The people he had trusted, Daniels, Graham, even the townsfolk, seemed complicit in something far darker than he had ever imagined. The few allies he thought he had turned out to have motives of their own. Even Martha, lying unconscious in the hospital, seemed to mock him with her cryptic warnings. And then came the twist. A revelation that shifted everything. Late one night, Mitchell broke into Graham's office, determined to find the missing piece of the puzzle. Instead, he found a hidden file containing a birth certificate, his own. But the name listed under Mother wasn't familiar. It was Martha's. The weight of the truth threatened to crush him. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his identity, was a lie. The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was personal, buried in the very fabric of who he was. And as the walls of his reality crumbled, Mitchell realized the game he was playing was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The rain came down in relentless sheets, slicing through the night like shards of glass. Officer Mitchell sat in his car, drenched in shadows and doubt, staring at the crumpled photo of Martha, Daniels, and Graham. The questions swirling in his mind had no answers, only dead ends and mounting dread. The revelation that Martha was his mother was a truth too jagged to grasp, but it explained the unexplainable, the strange familiarity, the cryptic warning, the chilling sense that every step he took had already been planned. Driven by a mix of anger, betrayal, and desperation, Mitchell made his way to the old church on the outskirts of town, where Graham held his midnight sermons. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying wood. The church loomed like a spectre in the storm, its spire cutting into the sky as if daring the heavens to intervene. Inside, flickering candlelight cast long, distorted shadows, illuminating faces he recognized and feared. Daniels was there, standing beside Graham, who seemed eerily calm. Around them were townsfolk Mitchell had once trusted, their expressions blank, their postures rigid. Mitchell stepped forward, his hand hovering near his holster. "It's over," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging within him. "I know everything." Graham tilted his head, his smile as unnerving as it was serene. "Do you?" he asked softly, his tone dripping with condescension. "Or do you only know the parts we allowed you to see?" The words hit Mitchell like a punch to the gut. He glanced at Daniels, searching for any sign of the man he once considered a brother. But Daniels wouldn't meet his gaze. Instead, he turned away, his shoulders slumping under the weight of unspoken guilt. "You've been playing me this whole time," Mitchell said, his voice rising. "All of you." "It's not about you," Graham replied, his voice smooth as silk. "It never was. You were a piece on the board, yes, but the game is far bigger than you could ever imagine." With that, Graham gestured toward a worn leather-bound book resting on the altar. Its cover bore the same strange symbol Mitchell had seen in the photos and etched into Martha's basement floor. "This," Graham continued, "is the truth you've been chasing. But be warned, truth has a cost." Mitchell's hands trembled as he approached the altar. The weight of the room pressed down on him, suffocating in its intensity. He opened the book and began to read, the words blurring as his heart raced. The passages detailed a chilling conspiracy, one that spanned generations and implicated the town's most powerful figures, including his own mother. The truth was both horrifying and liberating. Martha hadn't been paranoid, she had been protecting him. The symbols, the warnings, even her collapse. It had all been an attempt to shield him from the darkness that had consumed the town. But in doing so, she had become a pawn in the very game she sought to destroy. Mitchell turned to Graham, his voice breaking. "Why her? Why me?" "Because sacrifices must be made," Graham said coldly. "And some truths are worth any price." The confrontation reached its breaking point as the townsfolk began to close in, their faces twisted with a mix of fear and determination. Mitchell drew his gun, but even he knew it was futile. The storm outside roared louder, as if nature itself rebelled against the evil unfolding within the church. In the chaos, Daniels stepped forward, his eyes glistening with tears. "I never wanted this," he said, his voice cracking. "But they gave me no choice." "Then make a choice now," Mitchell demanded. "Help me stop this." Daniels hesitated, the weight of years of deception etched into his face. And then, in a moment of clarity, he turned on Graham, grabbing the book and tossing it into the flames of a nearby candle. The room erupted in chaos as the flames consumed the pages, the ancient words curling into ash. But the destruction of the book came at a cost. Graham lunged at Daniels, and in the struggle, a single gunshot echoed through the church. Daniels fell, his eyes wide with shock, blood pooling beneath him. Mitchell screamed, his voice raw with grief and rage. He turned to Graham, his gun trembling in his hand. "Go ahead," Graham taunted, his voice dripping with venom. "Pull the trigger. See if it makes you feel whole." But Mitchell didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving Graham and the burning church behind. As he stepped into the storm, he realized the truth. There was no victory here, only survival. The lies would linger, the darkness would remain, and the cost of truth would haunt him forever. The final scene lingered on Mitchell as he stood alone in the rain, his mother's words echoing in his mind. Asterisk, it's all connected, asterisk. The storm raged on, washing away the blood, but not the pain. And as the camera faded to black, a single, haunting question remained. Asterisk, was the truth worth it, or was ignorance the kindly asterisk?